All right, friends, I am just like over the moon about who I'm sitting with here today. I'm sitting here with my new friend, if I may be so bold, Savannah Guthrie. Savannah, welcome to Girls Night.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I love a girls' night.
It is. Is there anything better?
No, a girls' weekend.
A girls' weekend or a girls' trip, if you can get
exactly.
a week or so. Yes, exactly that. For women, for the two women who don't know who you are, or maybe need a reminder, whatever, everyone knows who you are. Tell us who you are, what you do, and I'd love to hear a fun fact about you.
Oh, okay. My name is Savannah Guthrie. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I'm currently the host of the Today Show on NBC. And a fun fact is that I was born in Melbourne, Australia.
How long did you live there?
2 years. I have no memory of it. We moved when I was a baby, a toddler, but my father was posted there on business and I happened to come along during that time. So I'm an Aussie, kind of, not really.
That is so cool. That is a great fun fact. That is a really good fun fact. Well, so here on the show, we talk about what I like to call the everything era. And it's this weird, wonderful, wildly difficult span of years between our late 20s, kind of early 40s-ish, where we make a lot of the most biographically significant decisions of our lives, like career, marriage, motherhood, all of it at the same time in front of a very opinionated audience. And so today, I really want to hear from you two things. One, about your life and about how you've put it together in a way that fits you. Because I think that, we can't be what we haven't seen. Mm-hmm. And so the more examples we can see of women living lives their own way, I feel like the more permission we feel to do the same. And then also, I know that when women are successful, specifically, I don't know if men get this question, but women, everyone wants to know, how do you do it all? Mm. And I know the answer is never. Oh, is always, I don't. Yes. I don't. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So I have a million questions and I'm going to try to be so quick about them.
No, I can't wait. I'm excited. This is like my favorite subject.
I love that. Well, so can you tell us a little bit about what this has looked like for you? Like, what were some of the biggest supposed to's you've wrestled with as you were making all of these giant decisions in your everything era?
You know what? My 25 to 40, I'm going to go ahead and go up to 45, 50 it's just a monument to detours, zigzags, wrong directions, reverse, down in a ditch, up over the hill, some triumphs, a lot of heartache. Nothing was a straight line. Like I sometimes joke, I'm like, no one would want to follow my path. Like my path is a zigzagged, jaggedy, broken, sometimes heartbroken line. But somehow God works it out. I find it in a way that things happen right on time, just as they're meant to. And it's hard to know that when you're just starting out or you're in the midst of making these threshold decisions that feel and frankly are so consequential. It's not one of those things where people are like, oh, you're making too big of a deal if you should sign this lease or that. It's like, who should I marry? Fundamental question. What should my job be? Fundamental. Where should I live? Fundamental. So I really always say to, folks in this age group, which I still count myself an honorary member of, even though I'm now 52. But it's like, it's not easy. And people always want to romanticize youth. And there's a lot that's wonderful about it, but it's also really, really hard. So I don't know if that's a long-winded way of asking, how did I do it? It wasn't pretty, but I got here. I spent a lot of years working on my career, trying really hard, and actually, and we can get into it a little bit. I mean, I did a couple things in my career that were at the time unthinkable and insane, but I followed my gut. And it ended up working out.
Tell me, okay, you have to tell me more about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the biggest example I have is when I started in local news. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I was just a regular girl. I have, no connections. I was quite literally the last person you would think is going to end up on the Today Show. The last. I studied journalism. I had some clips. I worked at a local TV station. And I was, behind the scenes during college as just a job, part-time job. And I started after college to try to land my first job in television news, which at that time, you were just sending tapes, literal tapes all over the country. And you were looking for a job that paid $12,000 a year, and you carried your own camera and ran around, and that was the thing. So I did that. I went on that path, and I started in a really tiny market in Butte, Montana, and then Columbia, Missouri, and then back to my hometown, Tucson, Arizona, which was a good market, and I was kind of on my way. And I started to realize that I needed to move on. I had to go to like the next big market, and I was not sure I wanted to anymore. Here I had poured all this time and effort, 6 years already of my life. I was 27 into being, on television and being a television journalist. And I thought, I'm going to take this LSAT, the law school entrance exam, and then that way it's kind of in my back pocket. And if I decide that I don't want to pursue TV, or frankly, what I actually thought was I can't get a job in a bigger market, I'll have a backup plan. Well, out of the blue, I got a letter after all the law school deadlines had passed. I got a letter randomly from one law school, Georgetown Law, which actually was kind of my dream school because I had lived in DC as an intern in college. And it said, we will extend the deadline and invite you to apply if you do so in the next 3 weeks. So I thought it was like it was so bizarre and kind of unheard of. I was like, what?
Yeah, I'm like, is that a thing? That's not a thing.
It's not a thing. I mean, I've talked to the admissions director at Georgetown about it since. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, you sent me a letter and I applied after the deadlines passed. And I actually had just broken up with the boyfriend and was like all just in despair and like, what am I going to do with my life? And then all of a sudden this letter comes and I felt like it was, God opening this door. And I was like, I think this is my job to walk through it. So I threw out the application. I threw it together in a couple of days, sent it off. 3 weeks later, I'm in. And so I had to make this decision. Do I stay with TV, or do I try to go down this path, move across the country, not a dime to my name, not a dime in financial aid, borrowing, $200,000 to do it, and saying goodbye forever to TV? And what should I do? And I hemmed and hawed and hemmed and hawed. And I had a reporter who I knew and had kind of worked with. It was kind of a mentor to me. And I asked him for his advice, and I was like, just doing the whole like, but what if this? And what if I want to get back into TV and then I never can? And what if I'm sorry? And I was doing the whole thing. And he said, Savannah, think big. And even though it's sort of a cliche bumper sticker slogan, I knew what he meant in that moment. He meant dream your biggest dream. Don't sit here and think about all the what ifs and what if I can't and how could this work out of that? He's like, think big for yourself. And I went home and I thought, what is my biggest dream? What do I really want? And I thought, well, secretly, I would like to be on the network news and be a legal correspondent. And when I admitted that to myself, this big, insane, far-fetched dream, then I knew what to do for the next step. I thought, well, then I guess I better go to law school because that would be a good background to have. And I don't know if I'll ever get back into TV. I don't know. I'm in a medium market in local news. How am I ever going to get to the national networks by getting out of TV and going to law school? It's an insane idea, but I did it. And it ended up working out. So that was like one of those big seminal moments where I did something really kind of crazy and life worked out.
I love that so much. This is like I have a degree in broadcast news. I wanted to be a journalist. I actually ended up being a missionary for a while instead. Like that was kind of a crazy left turn. But I did a political journalism internship at Georgetown for the summer. I know. I'm sitting here going like, I love that so much. If you could, well, I guess you might have already answered this. If you could go back and talk to yourself as you were making some of these decisions, is that what you would tell yourself? Like, think big?
Yes, but I think, honestly, I tell myself not to worry quite so much, which I don't think is advice I would even be capable of taking. So I don't know how far that gets anyone, like I don't want to tell your listeners, don't worry. It's like, they'd be thinking, well, that's easy for you to say, like you get to look back on it now, it worked out. Like now you know that it kind of worked out. I don't know. But that is what I would tell myself. I really thought of everything as kind of a be all end all decision, as like the fork in the road from which there was no recovery if you chose wrong. And life has taught me that that's not the case. And I mean, I've thrown myself off this path that I'm now, for my career, it would have been, I didn't even dare to dream to be the anchor of the Today Show, but probably secretly down deep, I really dreamed that. But I couldn't even admit to myself. Mm-hmm. But I threw myself off that path more than once, more than twice, maybe 3 times. And somehow I still ended up here. So there's a place where you have to follow your gut. You have to take big risks, not stupid risks, but big risks. And then there's a little bit of trust and faith that you're going to end up where you're meant to be. And maybe where you're meant to be is not necessarily where you think you want to be, but you can't write yourself out of your own destiny. I write that in my book, and that's how I feel. It's like, we get to choose our steps, but I believe, my faith is that God has already set out our path. Mm-hmm. So for example, there was a time when in my 30s, I was working at Court TV. It was still my dream. This is after law school. There's a whole story there too. I don't know how long, if you have a 7-hour podcast for all the times I crashed my career and ruined my life. But if you have more time, I'm happy to get into it.
I have as much time as you have. Seriously.
Yes. Okay, good. Because I got a lot of stories. But this is just a good example of that. I was at Court TV, which was a legal network. And it was big at the time because there were all these big celebrity trials. And I went around the country. I was a lawyer and I was on TV and as a reporter. So, it was a great combination. I was kind of on that path for that legal correspondent job at the network that I had dreamed about 15, 20 years prior. I recently had gotten married and I lived in Washington, D.C. And all of a sudden I get a call from NBC News in New York saying, we've seen your stuff on the air. We want to hire you for a job in New York. And this was my dream job. But I had just gotten married and my husband's job was in Washington. It was a non-starter. And side note, I wanted to have a family and be married so bad for most of my 30s. I wanted that more than I wanted anything in my career. In fact, I would have dumped my career over in one hot second if my personal life had ever worked out even like moderately, but it hadn't. But suddenly I'd gotten married and I thought, this is where the rubber meets the road. All those years that you prayed for a husband and you prayed for a family, and here comes your job of your lifetime, but you got to say no. And I did. And it broke my heart, but I thought that was the right thing to do. Now, let me just tell you, just to put the knife in a little harder, unfortunately, that marriage, it's a whole thing, but it didn't work out. I'm laughing, but I'm laughing so I don't cry. But it's okay. It's fine. It was like a short-lived, it just, but the point is that happened. Then my marriage didn't work out. Imagine you're me at 36 years old. You're like, boy, have you screwed it up bad, Miss Savannah. But over time, another job came around in Washington for NBC News, and they came back to me. And I took that job, and then I was on my way. And so this is what I mean, that you cannot screw up your life. You can mess it up. You can throw yourself off the path. You can certainly make things more difficult for yourself, but your path is your path. So make your best right decision. I always tell our interns or young people that work on our staff, like, if you're weighing this career opportunity or that career opportunity or, this internship or that internship, just dream big about where you secretly wish or hope you would be. And when you're dreaming to yourself, don't go small, go big. If you think you're Oprah, you tell yourself that. And then you don't tell anyone else, by the way. Tell your turtle.
Technically taken by Oprah herself, but yeah.
Don't even tell your mom, but tell your dog. No, but like, go ahead and be like, if I could wave a magic wand, this is what I think I would like to be. And then look at the opportunity that is actually before you and say, now, which one of these is one step, even if it's an inch of a step, which is a little closer to that place where I think I want to go. That's all I can say. And that's not a guarantee that will get you. You may never get there, but you want to feel that you're going in the general direction of your dream. And then you have to trust that life works out the way it wants to. It doesn't always work out how you want it to, when you want it to.
Yeah.
There will be those dark wilderness moments. And in those moments, I hope a story like mine tells you that there can be hope and there can be light. I mean, I know how lucky I am and how blessed.
Oh, I love everything about this. This is such a random thing. So I have twin 3-year-olds. And so I spend a lot of time reading stories. Have you read Rosie Revere, Engineer?
Not only have I read it, I kicked myself I wish I had written it. It's so good.
It is so good. It is. I'm like, this is our favorite book now. We just read this. You want to read
Architect? There's like 3 of them. And then Ada Twist, Scientist.
No, I have not. And I'm getting on Amazon immediately after this to buy them.
They're all so good.
There's a part in it where like she has all these dreams and she kind of gets laughed at, when she brings them to light a couple times. And, but she has this like great aunt Rose who comes in and believes in her dreams. And she says, the only like failure comes if you quit. Like, and I just feel like that's so your story. Like if you had quit, that would have been the end of the story.
Yeah.
But
and
you
in fact, I actually did quit sometimes. And it still wasn't the end of the story. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the perspective that I'm trying to share, and look, when you're in it, if you had told me that when I was 36 years old and divorced, I would have been like, forget it. You're crazy. Why? That's like believing in Santa Claus. That's crazy talk. But all I can tell you is that I really believe and have been blessed enough to see that life has a way of working out. Sometimes it's good that it's not all up to us because our choices aren't all that great. So sometimes they are, but it's nice to leave a little space for fate. And if you're a person of faith, for God, for your destiny, and trust that whatever it is and on whatever timing, that timing is just right. I mean, I had my kids at 42 and 45 or 41 and 44. I can never remember because I'm middle-aged and I can't remember anything anymore. But the point is like, I thought it was over for me. I didn't think it, I knew it. And yet it wasn't. And so I just hope that I can just extend hope. Even if you don't believe it, you don't really, or you're cynical about it because you've been hurt and frustrated. You know what? Wouldn't you rather just hope? Like you could sit there and be like, I know it's not going to work out. I know I've screwed up. I know, or I'm afraid. But there's nothing wrong with hoping, Even if you end up feeling like, well, what if I hope and I am disappointed? It's like, wouldn't you still rather spend your time hopeful?
Well, like, aren't you disappointed anyway?
Well, right. I mean, hope is just I remember once I grew up around in Tucson, Arizona, and I know like a little bit of Spanish. It's a lifelong goal to learn Spanish. That's what I'm going to do when I retire. But I always was struck that in Spanish, this is kind of odd, but in Spanish, the word for wait is the same word as the word for hope. It's one word, esperar. And it's like, for some reason, that was so profound to me when I realized it. I was like, waiting and hoping are the same thing. It's just how you wait. Do you just wait? Or do you wait with hope? In Spanish, it's the same word.
I knew that, but I didn't know that.
I always found that to be so interesting.
That is so... Okay. I feel like we are all going to have to just like lay down and process after this. I love this. I love this so much. I want to ask you, when women are successful, and again, do men get this question? I don't know that they do. Everyone always wants to know, how do you do it all? How do you balance everything? Yeah. But the more women I talk to and the further I get in my own story, the more I know that is not a thing. Nobody does it all.
Yeah.
Tell us just as much as you can, as much as you feel comfortable, what don't you do? Or what do you outsource? Or what have you just had to get over in order to make space for the life you have?
This is so embarrassing. So if we have any judgy McJudgers out there, get ready, rev your engines. Because first of all, look, I've worked a long time, and I'm so blessed to be in this job and to have time and resources I never had. I could not have had, I know plenty of colleagues who do, but when I was working at the White House and working 16-hour days, 6 days a week, I don't know how I would have been able have kids and do all that stuff. But right now I have a job there's a lot of pressure and there's odd hours and there are moments of super high intensity. It is actually a great mom job and predictable in its hours mostly. And so the things I don't do are a direct result of the benefits and that I'm lucky enough to enjoy because I have this great job. And so one of the things I don't do, I'm giving you this whole preamble to just say I get it. One of the things I don't do is cook because I can't. I just can't. So I have a babysitter, I have 2 kids in school, I have a full-time job. The babysitter cooks. I do not. Now, I wish that I could. When I try, the kids don't like it. I don't like it either. So I'm at peace. You could either have frozen popcorn chicken every night and no vegetable, and that would be what I cooked, or you can have the babysitter while you're off at school. She makes a little something. So that's like a thing that I don't do.
Bless it.
And I think everyone wants me to not do that. But also it's like, if you're able to, if there's some things that you can give up and, again, I recognize the privilege of having a babysitter who can cook for me, like my mom cooked, cleaned, did everything, so she was constantly working as a stay-at-home mom. For me, that means that in the afternoon, I can be with my kids all afternoon and take them to all their activities and play dates. So it's sort of like, I get to make that choice. That is a lucky choice to even have the opportunity to make. But it also is, I think my time is so much better spent hanging out with them and doing their homework or playing blocks or, Battleship. Yes, you sunk my battleship again, Charlie. Like, battleship. So much Uno. So much Crazy Eights.
There just isn't enough time in a day.
Yeah.
Like there just isn't. No one gets more than 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
And so everything takes time. You can only cram so much in.
Yeah. And also I feel like we need space, and that's a luxury that a lot of young people, young working women, young moms, young working moms, not just moms in general of any age, like you need space just for yourself, like space of nothing. I'm all into self-care. I love a massage as much as the next guy, but like what we really need that we just don't, not one of us get enough of is just time to do nothing, to get bored and be like, maybe I should write in my journal, or it's like that's those moments when you're young or you're in college or whatever. That's how I learned to play the guitar. I had a job, but I didn't work the weekends, and I'd sit all day and like try to learn a song on the guitar and sing. It's like we don't have that space to discover aspects of ourselves anymore. So if you can find a little way to find that space, I think that it's really. It's so fulfilling. And also it's such a self-discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, man. This is kind of similar, but I want to just see what comes to mind for you. So, we see the highlight reel of everyone else's life. And I think when we do that, it's really easy to assume that every part of their life is as put together as the parts we see. And really, my favorite way to combat that comparison that creeps up is by reminding myself and everybody else that for everything you do see of a person's life, there's also so much that you don't see. And so
most of it, I would argue.
Yeah, right? So if you can fill this in for us, what you see is blank, but what you don't see is blank.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'll tell you and then I'll give my whole long explanation. I'll say what you see is, I hope, joy and smiles and happiness. And what you don't see is anxiety and fear and self-doubt. And that doesn't mean that I'm putting on a veneer of happiness and joy and all that. That's me. But so is the other part. Mm-hmm. And, it's taken me a long time to be able to just make friends with that aspect of my personality and to just accept that, I'm a worrier, I like I said, have a lot of self-criticism. I have a pretty harsh inner critic, and that's a lot to contend with. That's a mountain to overcome every day. And I'm learning. Some days I'm better at it than others, and But I think that's probably because, my job is to get up and smile. And it's genuine because I love this job and I love the people I work with. And I'm a morning person. 4:00 in the morning does
Thank goodness.
concept a little bit, but yeah. So I love it, and that is who I am. But I need time alone. I need time to write in my journal or plink on my guitar or just cry. Just to let out the steam. I'm super, super sensitive deep inside. So that's what I think that'd be my best answer. Even when I go, I think about it at work all the time, and people are like, how do you do these interviews? Or, oh my gosh, you had to go do a debate or a town hall or this or that. And weren't you didn't seem nervous, weren't you? I'm like, what? If you had a diagram of my inner dialogue and self, it'd be black marks, I have so much anxiety and stress. But that's kind of part of what I've learned is that's my process. It's not pretty, but that's how I get to where I can come and do the job. I'm not doing the job without those feelings. I'm doing the job with those feelings and in spite of those feelings. There's no moment, not leading up to this very morning on today, that I didn't have at least one thing where I felt anxious about it or a little nervous. Or if you had said, you don't have to do it, I'd be like, oh, great, I don't want to. Because I can get in my head about things. And so the one of the things I've learned in this job, and it probably applies in personal things too, is just to accept that that's who you are. That is your process. That's how I study. That's how I get ready. Sort of, it looks like anxiety. It is kind of anxiety. I don't mean it in some clinical sense, but it's that's just who I am. That's part of who I am. And that's okay too.
For years, I had this just deep desire. Currently, what I want to do is I want to corner every woman I see and go, who takes care of your kids? And how do you make the time of all this happen? That's the question I always want to ask now. But for years, for the last 10 years of my career, I wanted to corner every person I see doing anything and go, are you scared? Because I felt like I am so nervous every time I put myself out there. And there are times when it feels like, I think so many of us feel this, that it feels like that's a deal breaker. If you feel that way, that means you're doing something you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I remember a couple years ago watching the Olympics, and I remember just staring at all the athletes going, are you feeling on the inside what I'm feeling on the inside about every day I show up to work? And I just wanted to ask them, because I don't know, something about hearing I'm scared too. And I show up every day with those fears, not in spite of them.
Yeah.
Helps you know that if you're scared, that doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. It just means that what you're doing is scary.
Yeah. It's actually the appropriate response to doing something scary is to be scared. Yeah. And the courage comes in when you just decide to do it anyway. You hold hands with your fears and you just do it anyway. It's interesting. I've covered the Olympics a lot. And I remember talking to a very famous gymnastics coach. And she said, I was down at their famous place where they train these elite gymnasts. And she said, I've had many, many gymnasts that you've never heard of that are probably maybe even more talented than the household names you know. But the difference between them and the ones you know is the ones you know could do it in spite of the pressure. They were scared too, and they could do it. They were better gymnasts, but when the pressure came on, they collapsed. And so you realize you kind of have to do both things. And it's not like you're going to get to some point of Zen where you're not afraid. I mean, a thing I say a lot too, I said it in graduation speeches, and I really, really believe it, but it's hard to live it, is that the most interesting things you do, anything you really do of value, whether it's going to be something in your career that's notable or valuable in terms of your own personal growth, it's going to be out of your comfort zone. It just is. Nothing amazing in your life is going to happen where you are certain, where you are never wrong, where no one is questioning you or challenging you. It's just not where your growth is. It's not where your strength is. And it's not where your beauty and flourishing is. It's hard because sometimes you take those risks and you leap and you crash down. It's not pretty. But other times you will stick the landing. And even if you don't, you're going to have to climb out. And the climbing is really the whole point, because most of us climb more than we stick the landing and wave back at the crowd and say, like, how wasn't that so great?
Love it. Just love it. I love it. One last question, and this is a selfish question. You have been doing like big, beautiful work. You're launching a book out in the world, which we're going to talk about in a minute. I have my first real book coming out at the end of April, and I wanted to know, like,
Congrats.
thank you. Do you have any words of wisdom for like sending a book out into the world?
Gosh, no, I'm just about to do it myself. Do you have any words of wisdom? We are in the same place, Stephanie. I mean, all I can say is this is the scariest thing I've ever done.
Is it?
By far, the most personal thing I've ever done. I wrote a book about faith. Who am I to write a book about faith? I mean, I don't have I'm not a theologian. I'm not a scholar. I didn't go to seminary. I'm just a regular person. I'm just a mom. I certainly am not holding up my life as any example of morality or, perfect rectitude or pious practices or anything. I'm quite literally a regular, messy person who loves God and who has felt the love of God, more importantly. And I just felt like I had something to say about that. But doing it was so terrifying, and is so terrifying. I mean, I'm nervous. I don't know what anyone will think. I don't know. It's like saying, here's my heart. Feel free to go ahead and stomp on it. Hopefully you won't. But it's life. It's the world. Some will, some won't. And I actually, doing the book for me was an example of what we were just talking about. And I realized, I told you a couple of the good old stories from the old days about like big risks I took in my career, and how I always tell younger people, you got to get out of that comfort zone. When it came along that I had this opportunity to do the book and I was nervous to do it, I remembered my own advice. And I remembered that it had been a good long time before. It had been a long time since I'd taken it. And that it was time for me to walk the walk and practice what I preach. Or as my editor ended up saying, which always made me laugh, he said, you're smoking what you're selling. Which I just love so much. So, that's my advice. Put it out in the world. You did it. It's coming out.
Mm.
Just now, just go forward with sincerity and confidence and lots of prayers and hopes, and trust yourself. Trust that there's a reason you did it. There's a reason you have this opportunity. And don't read the comments would be my number one advice to anyone.
Do you not?
Do I not read the comments?
Yeah. Or like,
I really try not to read Instagram comments. I have been lately a little bit with the book because I feel like it's a little more interactive. Mm-hmm. And actually I've been blown away at how kind everyone's been and so supportive and like, oh, I'm so glad you wrote this book. It's kind of shocking. So, but generally I would say don't read the comments, because here's the thing. I mean, I don't know about all you all out there, but I could read 100 lovely comments and one nasty piece of business. And that's the thing that'll burrow down in my soul. And I wish that I weren't that way. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I would tell myself back in the day, like, if you're going to believe the bad stuff, then force yourself to believe the good stuff too. Like that's the trade. That's the deal you got to make with yourself.
Yeah.
But I couldn't make that deal. Mm-hmm. The good stuff is lovely, but it goes in one ear and out the other. Like I don't hear like, oh, I liked your outfit today and go, my outfit was so great. But if someone says, fire your stylist, fire your hairdresser, fire your this, whatever, as they do, it hurts my feelings and it sticks with me. So I try really not to engage with that, even though I think it's really important for us to get feedback and have really, meaningful and honest discussions and constructive criticism. I'm just not sure that like social media is on the level or is that place.
Yeah. So, well, and that's because that's not constructive. That's
like, yeah. I mean, it's yeah. And I'm sure sometimes it can be. It's just, and also it's like this is my advice for you. You have to protect your heart a little bit.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean having some scar tissue. It just means making good decisions about who gets in on it, who gets access to like your real inner self. And you're already putting a book out there. So by definition, you're opening yourself up. But if you're sitting alone and you're like scrolling through the thing and you're in a point of vulnerability and someone says something that's really mean, like that can really get in there. So don't put yourself in that position. Like protect your heart.
I love this. I love this. Last, tell us I feel like you have told us about the book. And as you were saying, like, I'm a person who loves God and has been loved by God. I'm like, there is no book I would rather read. Like that's exactly it. That's exactly who I want to hear from right now when it comes to faith. And so, but just give us like the quick summary of the book, and then I'm going to link to it everywhere so that we can all go get it and support you and cheer you on, because we all need that.
So appreciate it. I'll give you my most succinct version. It's called Mostly What God Does. And the rest of that sentence, it's a quote, is mostly what God does is love you. I've lived a real life and I've made some good decisions and some terrible decisions. And I grew up in the church, and I grew up, my sister always said, we had 5 people in our family, and she would say, God is the 6th member of our family. So I've always had a relationship with God. And in a way, I've always been in conversation with God. But like a lot of us who grew up in the church, I wasn't always sure what God thought about me. And I would ask myself as I got into my 20s and 30s, what does God think about this decision or that decision? And I had periods of great devotion and then periods of distance. Maybe I get a new boyfriend and get distracted, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get up and do my Bible study. Oh, I didn't do this, or I did something I know that is, not something I should. And I'd wonder what is, and I'd imagine, I think some of us, it's so easy to imagine this big scolding taskmaster of a God reading us the riot act. And when you imagine that, then of course you keep your distance. And what I've come to see is that while God isn't some pushover who doesn't have rules, and I would say more just guidelines, rules, but things that like, if you want to have a happier life, it'd be better if you don't kill, steal, cheat, whatever. But what I realized is that mostly what God has been doing this whole time was love me. And that's what he's mostly doing for you and for everyone listening. That's who he is. It has nothing to do with how good you are or how bad you are, how pious you are or are not, how much faith you have or how much doubt you have. God is God because that's who he is, not because of you. And the whole book is really about that. Mostly what God does is love us. Love, hope, joy, presence, praise, faith, purpose. It all feeds into the same thing. And if we could feel that love, like if we could really believe it and absorb it, it's transformative. It would change everything. It would change who we are. It would change our every interaction. It would change how we saw ourselves and the courage we could find within ourselves to go after those dreams we talked about. And it would change our world because that love cannot be contained. It has to be spilled out. It has to be shared. And that's, I think, God's whole plan. We were always the plan A. I'm going to love you. Now you go do it too.
Yeah.
That's the book.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Add to cart. Add to cart. Savannah, you are just an absolute gem. Thank you so much for being you. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for living your life and sharing it with us, and for being a woman we can look up to. I just am so grateful for your time today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for such an awesome conversation. I could have gone on 6 more hours just with the life mistakes and detours.
I could, seriously, I'm like, listen, I know you have places to be. So this is all my discipline at work, ending it now. So,
thank you so much.